I think it's known to everyone here that HBO's Dune prophecy takes us on a journey some 10,000 years before Paul Atreides became the figurehead of Frank Herbert's classic sci-fi universe. So although the show might not have Timothée Chalamet or his good looks, it will still explore the ancestors of Paul, Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen, and Princess Irulan, and it's bound to flesh out the messy history that shaped their fates. Apart from the evolution of the Sisterhood into something more powerful like the Bene Gesserit, this show will explore just how and why the Harkonnen Atreides feud started and what came in the aftermath. And in this video, we'll try to explore the entire Harkonnen Atreides rivalry. We're ready to go, but before we get too deep into it, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I don't want to mourn. Florian murdered Griffin, and now he's disappeared again.
Where it all began! The birth of the feud in Dune prophecy. The 6-episode prequel is mostly based on Sisterhood of Dune, co-written by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson, which explores the evolution of the Sisterhood into the Bene Gesserit, the mysterious and powerful order to which Paul's mother Jessica belongs. At its heart is Valya Harkonnen, portrayed by Jessica Barden and later Emily Watson, who rises through a cult of witch-like women to become the Mother Superior of what will eventually be the Bene Gesserit. Unsurprisingly, Valya is as morally twisted as her descendants. She uses the voice, a hypnotic tone, to compel a fellow sister to take her own life. Now, you have to know that Sister Valya is the inventor or discoverer of the voice, something that later becomes a staple for Bene Gesserit women. Her trajectory is pretty horrifying to say the least, but it gives insight into the deep-seated ruthlessness of the Harkonnens, whose family legend paints them as victims of an Atreides betrayal that condemned them to an icy wasteland. Naturally, the show explores the conflict between the Harkonnens and the Atreides, a beef older than written history in Herbert's world. While Frank Herbert's original books only hinted at its roots, his son's work, particularly The Battle of Corran, fills in some of the blanks. And this last battle, the battle which concluded the Butlerian Jihad, or the war of humanity against thinking machines, was what started the whole Atreides-Harkonnen thing. We'll get into the details on that in just a bit, but we just want to say that whether you accept those additions as canon or not, you have to agree that the details give context to the war between the two houses. And since Dune Prophecy has also established the Battle of Corran, it's time we accept Brian Herbert's work as canon. So yeah, the seeds of the feud, cowardice, betrayal, and revenge drive much of the power plays in Dune Prophecy and the source material. So now, let's explore in detail the Butlerian Jihad and the Battle of Corran. The Butlerian Jihad, a war of humanity against the gods of machines. Literally. Of course, the story of this war is discussed at great length in the book Dune, the Butlerian Jihad, which starts by introducing us to the very first bunch of characters destined to evolve into legendary families. These were the men and women who laid the foundations of houses like Corrino, Harkonnen, and of course House Atreides. At the forefront is Serena Butler, the daughter of Mannion Butler, who serves as the viceroy of the League of Nobles. The Butler family, after which the Jihad is named, marries into one of the Harkonnen lineages. In fact, this union would later lead to the birth of the Corrino family following the Battle of Corran. Among the other characters who would prove to be turning points in the grand old history of the Imperium are Xavier Harkonnen and Vorian Atreides. Xavier starts off as a Tercero, a skilled fighter defending the League's capital, Seleucia Secundus, from a Psymech assault. Please note, Seleucia Secundus becomes the home world of House Corrino later on. Now, about the Psymechs, these are fascinating yet terrifying creatures, machines equipped with human brains. These hybrid beings were the masterminds behind the creation of the Omnius computer, an AI that now dominates all machinery and a significant portion of the galaxy. Omnius and similar entities emerged from humanity's lazy streak and allowed machines to handle even the simplest tasks. However, things went south when a Psymech named Xerxes, also known as a Titan by the original 20, made critical errors. This pushed Omnius to evolve into a sentient being determined to eradicate human disorder by enforcing machine perfection. And this, my friend, became the basis of the war between the Scuffle and led to a full-blown war between humans and their mechanical creations. In all of this, Vorian Atreides' role is visibly and notably peculiar. You see, despite his last name linking him to House Atreus from the ancient Greek epic, the Iliad, he's actually the descendant of Agamemnon, the Psymech Titan. About Agamemnon, before leaving for Troy, he sacrificed his own daughter for favors from the gods. Of course, his wife didn't take too kindly to this and spent the next 10 years plotting revenge. When Agamemnon returned, the wife killed him and his concubine Cassandra in cold blood. So this sort of a lineage gives House Atreides a pretty fascinating dynamic. It tells us that the Atreides, who seem like the poster boys of all things noble and righteous in the Imperium, weren't all good. Further, I like the blend of mythological heritage with futuristic conflict. Moving on, we also have Serena's journey take a dark turn when she is captured by the sentient machines. She falls under the supervision of Erasmus, arguably one of the book's most intriguing and repulsive characters. A robot with a curious fascination about understanding humans. Erasmus's methods are anything but humane, and he would do practically anything from vivisection and torture to inflicting psychological trauma in his slave pens. Oh yeah, he also had slave pens where the slaves were, of course, humans. Despite his horrifically violent and gruesome tendencies, Erasmus develops an unexpected fondness for Serena, a feeling shared by the young Vorian Atreides. I think at this point we should also tell you just how tumultuous Serena's personal life was. She was once romantically involved with Xavier, and their relationship went through a whirlpool of emotions and complications when she discovered she was pregnant with his child. Choosing to name her son Mannion after her father, Serena hoped for a brighter future amidst the chaos, which was nothing more than holding on to a wooden fork while drowning in a sea storm. As you might expect, Erasmus wasn't at all thrilled about this new development. He viewed Serena's pregnancy as a distraction from his mission, and in response, he takes drastic measures. Not only does he remove Serena's uterus, he also brutally kills her newborn son, Mannion. This tells us quite a bit about the ruthless nature of the machines, but most importantly, the killing of an infant child further fueled the fire in the hearts of humans against the machines and set the stage for the intense human-machine conflict that was to follow. So, as we were saying, the unrequited and unprovoked killing of a young boy turned the spark of hatred in the hearts of humans into a flame, a wildfire, that became the Butlerian Jihad. Another outcome was that young Mannion became the first martyr and got the title Mannion the Innocent. Witnessing this tragedy, Vorian Atreides realizes the deception of his life as a machine trustee, or people who supported machines, and decided to switch sides. He's only joined by another trustee and ruthless overseer, Iblis Ginjo, who is on his way to becoming the Grand Patriarch of the League of Nobles. With Serena Butler and Iblis leading the religious charge, the true Butlerian Jihad kicks off. They rally under their banners with Generals Xavier Harkonnen and Vorian Atreides steering the human forces. Opposing them stands Omnius and Erasmus, along with the fierce Psymech Titans. These Titans, once loyal machine servants, now crave independence from their mechanical overlords, and these guys now want their own tech-driven rebellion against humanity. Humans score their first big win by atomically wiping out Earth and the Earth-Omnius Alliance. Despite this triumph, the war rages on, signaling that peace is still a long way off. Meanwhile, on a desolate desert planet, legends begin to take shape with Salem Wormrider. As an outcast from his tribe, Salem envisions the future of Shai-Hulud and dedicates himself to protecting his deity from those who seek to exploit the precious spice melange. Needless to say, the Shai-Hulud were the supermassive sandworms from Arrakis, aka Dune. So, guys like Salem had their own agenda in all of this and could be considered as the other factions participating in the war. We also meet the sorceresses of Rosak, obsessed with genetics, and we think it's fairly evident who these sorceresses would turn out to be. These sorceresses surfaced before the Butlerian Jihad from the planet Rosak's wild and toxic environment. The planet's harsh biology wreaked havoc on early colonizers' genes, often leaving newborns with severe physical and mental disabilities. However, some kids dodged this fate, and the girls in particular developed powerful telekinetic abilities for reasons still unclear. By the time the Jihad kicked off, these sorceresses could unleash lethal psychic attacks against Psymechs, though their original purpose remained a mystery. These women ran a fiercely chauvinistic society led by the Supreme Sorceress. They viewed males, whether from Rosak or elsewhere, as inferior and looked down on women who didn't have their unique telekinetic powers. Their main goal was to expand and strengthen their own kind by meticulously maintaining genetic records. They carefully selected suitable male partners and tracked genome trends, avoiding genetic wildcards unless someone was exceptionally talented. A daring example was when their leader, Zufa Senva, paired up with the League of Nobles politician Iblis Ginjo. Politically, Rosak's sorceresses were staunchly anti-thinking machines and firmly sided with the League of Nobles. Their strong support for military action fueled the long-standing conflict with Omnius. Yet, behind the scenes, they kept a secret computer installation loaded with extensive genetic heritage databases. This blend of power, prejudice, and secret knowledge made the sorceresses a formidable force in the galaxy's tumultuous landscape. Anyways, we also had other players like the pioneering Dr. Suk and Theo Holtzman, famous for his innovations, who play crucial roles alongside Aurelius Venport and Norma Senva, the mastermind behind space-folding technology. Space-folding is how one is able to travel vast distances in short spans of time, like Interstellar. Next, we also have Ishmael, a Zen Sunni slave captured by Tlulax's slavers and transported to Poitrine. In captivity, Ishmael befriends Alid, a Zen Shiite slave. Together, they find themselves working in Holtzman's laboratories, where they hatch a plan to sabotage one of his experiments. Their rebellious actions don't go unnoticed, and as punishment, they are reassigned to create a massive mosaic that chronicles the history of the Blood Dynasty. Under the influence of Bel Molay, a charismatic slave leader, Ishmael and Alid inspire a broader slave uprising. The revolt gains momentum, but Lord Nikito Blood's dragoons quickly crush the rebellion. Although the slaves are granted amnesty due to the ongoing war with the machines, Bel Molay faces a grim fate, being mutilated and executed for his defiance. So yeah, this is more or less what the Butlerian Jihad was and how it unfolded in various parts of the Imperium. Now, we don't think it's prudent to explore every event, because that won't help with the subject of our video, so we're going to jump right into the Battle of Corran, which was the final battle against the machines, but also the first skirmish between House Atreides and Harkonnen. The Battle of Corran! 100 years after the start of the Butlerian Jihad, the world was split into two major sections. The first begins in 108 BG, or before Guild, and portrays a ruthless biological war launched by machines against humans. The second section, set in 88 BG, dives into the aftermath of the Great Purge, culminating in the legendary Battle of Corran. These events tie together the threads from the earlier novels, laying the foundation for the political and social dynamics in Frank Herbert's Dune series. Now, the Evermind Omnius is scheming to annihilate humanity. Guided by the betrayal of Yorek Thur, Omnius develops a sinister RNA retrovirus with the help of the captured Tlulaxis scientist, Wrecker Van, and the twisted robot, Erasmus. The virus, delivered via capsules to human-inhabited worlds, boasts a horrifying 40% mortality rate, paralyzing the League of Nobles and leaving them ripe for an invasion. Luck intervenes when it's discovered that consuming spice melange boosts immunity to the virus and even halts its effects in some infected individuals. This too-good-to-be-true discovery helps humanity stabilize, but Omnius, unaware of this resistance, presses forward with his plans. He assembles the bulk of his machine armies from synchronized planets and sends them on a massive assault against Seleucia Secundus, the League's capital. Faced with imminent doom, Vorian Atreides devises a daring counteroffensive known as the Great Purge. The plan involves using pulse atomic weapons to obliterate the synchronized planets and eliminate Omnius completely. The catch? To execute the strategy, humanity must rely on a still shaky space-folding technology to strike before the machine fleet can regroup. This gamble carries immense risk, but offers the only chance of survival. The Great Purge succeeds in wiping out Omnius on nearly all synchronized worlds, but the cost is staggering. Every time the human fleets fold space, they lose 10% of their forces to technical failures. Worse, the atomic strikes obliterate billions of human captives on the machine-controlled planets, pushing the death toll to unthinkable heights. Despite these sacrifices, the humans fail to destroy Omnius on Corran, the primary synchronized planet. Thanks to the Cogiter Vidad's warning, Omnius Prime prepares for the counterattack and recalls the machine fleet to defend its final stronghold. Though the Purge doesn't achieve total annihilation of the machines, it marks a turning point in the conflict. The machine scourge is diminished and the momentum of Serena Butler's jihad grinds to a halt. Her crusade is declared over, paving the way for the next chapter in humanity's struggle for freedom. The Battle of Corran begins where the Great Purge left off, with the humans and thinking machines stuck in a stalemate on Corran. Although the humans can't completely destroy the machines, they trap them by deploying a scrambler satellite net around the pilot. Any machine trying to escape gets its gel circuitry brain fried. For nearly 20 years, this tense deadlock continues. The machines remain stranded, while most humans are too exhausted or hesitant to launch another all-out battle. Omnius decides to switch tactics. On Thur's suggestion, he sends out machines with primitive minds that can bypass the scrambler network to strike at Seleucia Secundus and Rossack. These attacks don't achieve much, but serve as a sharp reminder that the machines are still lurking, ready to pounce. Meanwhile, Vorian Atreides, riding high on his victory over the Titans, convinces the League of Nobles to finally confront Omnius on Corran. When the army of humanity arrives, they face brutal resistance. The machines, in a twisted move, use human captives as shields, limiting the humans' options. Betrayal within the ranks worsens the situation, leaving the army bogged down and unable to deploy their full arsenal. The humans are forced to unleash a significant portion of their atomics to clear out the robot defenders. A ground assault led by the Ginaz mercenaries deals the final blow to Omnius, ending the long reign of the thinking machines. To honor this victory, Fay-Kan Butler takes the name Fay-Kan Corrino, cementing the legacy of Corran in history. The chaos doesn't end with the machines, though. Raina Butler, scarred by witnessing the death of her parents in the machine scourge and surviving it herself, starts a fanatical crusade. Claiming to have visions of Serena Butler, she begins destroying any technology that remotely resembles a thinking machine, from harmless gadgets to critical medical devices. Her zeal attracts followers who form the cult of Serena, an extension of the Martyrists who already worship Serena Butler, Mannion the Innocent, and Iblis Ginjo. Ironically, the cult causes more chaos among humans than the machines ever could. Raina's influence leads to lasting changes in human society. The cult enforces an unshakable commandment: no machines can be created in the likeness of a human mind. This principle becomes central to the OC Bible and underpins humanity's strict laws against thinking machines, with violations punishable by death or worse. Despite contradictions like destroying technology while continuing to rely on spaceships, the cult's fanaticism leaves an indelible mark. While Corran remains a central front, the Titans, Agamemnon, Juno, and Dante try to rebuild their Psymech empire. Primero Quinton Butler is captured and turned into a Psymech after attempting to aid plague-stricken Wallach 9. Learning of this, Vorian Atreides fakes his retirement, infiltrates Hesra, and gains Agamemnon's trust. Vorian and Quentin manage to kill the Titans and their followers. Tragically, Quentin sacrifices himself in the process, leaving Vorian to carry the burden of their victory. The aftermath of the Battle of Corran. By 88 BG, the League of Nobles had nearly eradicated the synchronized empire of the thinking machines, with Omnius, the Evermind, reduced to a single outpost on the planet Corran. The League, under the fervent influence of the cult of Serena Butler, launched a final assault, known as the Battle of Corran, to eliminate the machines once and for all. Vorian Atreides, serving as Supreme Bashar of the Army of Humanity, commanded the League forces, while Abulurd Harkonnen, grandson of Xavier Harkonnen, served under him as a Bashar. The battle revealed a plot by the machines that could endanger millions. You see, a space ring of cargo pods known as the Bridge of Hrethgir, filled with 2 million human captives, was set to detonate if the fleet crossed it. Vorian believed the sacrifice was unavoidable, prioritizing the destruction of Omnius. Abelard, however, refused to comply, unwilling to bear responsibility for so many innocent deaths. When he disobeyed orders, Vorian relieved him of duty and confined him. Abelard, defiant, disabled the League fleet's weapons in a last-ditch effort to save the captives. This act increased casualties for the League, but did not prevent victory. Abelard's actions branded him a coward. Though initially sentenced to death, Vorian proposed banishment instead, ensuring Abelard kept the Harkonnen name as a mark of shame. Viceroy Fay-Kan Butler agreed, and Abelard was exiled to Lankaville, a desolate planet where he started a family. The Harkonnen line continued through his descendants, who grew up hating the name Atreides, blaming Vorian for their family's dishonor. Years later, Vorian himself faced exile, choosing to live on Arrakis to secure the safety of his homeworld Kepler. However, his past caught up with him when Griffin Harkonnen, Abelard's ambitious great-grandson, tracked him down. Griffin learned of Vorian's location through his sister Valia and confronted him in a Zen-Sunni's siege deep in the desert. Naib Sharnak, leader of the siege, demanded the two settle their feud through combat. During their duel, Griffin revealed that Vorian's wife on Kepler had died, distracting him and gaining the upper hand. Despite this, Griffin chose not to kill Vorian, claiming honor over vengeance. Their conflict seemed resolved, but fate intervened. Vorian was being pursued by his father Agamemnon's children, Hyla and Andros, who had survived in isolation within a robotic outpost. They attacked Vorian and Griffin in the desert, killing Griffin before a sandworm swallowed them. Vorian sent condolences to Valia, but she rejected them, swearing revenge. The feud remained alive, fueled by Valia's anger and Griffin's tragic death. Griffin's death weighed heavily on Vorian, prompting him to secretly aid the Harkonnen family's struggling whaling business on Lankaville. Later, he traveled to Caladan to reconnect with his descendants, including Ori, Shander, and Willem Atreides. However, tragedy struck as Tula Harkonnen, Valia's younger sister, enacted vengeance against the Atreides in the name of the feud. Vorian eventually confronted Valia on Wallach 9, where a duel left him presumed dead by his Caladan relatives. In truth, he survived and chose to disappear once more, leaving his relatives to continue the battle. Willem Atreides, determined to honor his lineage, formally established House Atreides in opposition to House Harkonnen, which gained influence under Danvis Harkonnen. Danvis and Willem became rivals for the position of Chamberlain to Emperor Javico. Danvis, seeking power, conspired with his cousin Gerard to frame and kill Willem. However, Gerard betrayed Danvis and supplanted him as a baron of House Harkonnen. Willem, on his deathbed, pleaded for peace between the houses, but his wish went unfulfilled. The feud burned brighter, shaping the destinies of both houses and leaving an enduring legacy of hatred and ambition. So you see, the Harkonnens were not always the bad guys, circumstances made them so. Vorian branded Abulard a coward, and the Imperium exiled the Harkonnen family to a desolate world where they scraped by selling whale meat. This disgrace planted the seeds of the Harkonnen Atreides feud, which is by far one of the most enduring rivalries in the Dune universe. While fans debate whether this backstory is canonical, it fuels Valia Harkonnen's actions and ambitions in Dune prophecy. Another faction that was greatly influenced by the Battle of Corran was from Rosak. The sorceresses take some important steps toward becoming the Bene Gesserit. A resurgence of the Machine Plague after the Great Purge brings Rakella Berto Anarul, granddaughter of Vorian Atreides, and Dr. Mohanda Suk to aid the affected. Rakella contracts the plague but recovers miraculously thanks to the unique substances found on the planet. The chief sorceress, Tisia Senva, paranoid and power-hungry, views Rakella as a threat. She poisons Rakella with the Rosak drug, a precursor to the infamous Water of Life, intending to eliminate her. Instead, Rakella survives and gains access to other memory, a transformative experience. Senva, overwhelmed by the consequences of her actions, ends her own life, and Rakella emerges as the first Reverend Mother, and this was the formal genesis of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood. Dr. Mohanda Suk, following the resolution of the crisis on Rosak, turns his attention to establishing an unparalleled medical school. His vision becomes the foundation for the renowned Suk School, whose graduates would serve humanity for generations. Interestingly, he seems to be based on the great Indian leader Gandhi, whose real name was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. In the prequel series, Valia is consumed by her family's tainted legacy. She blames the Atreides for their downfall and sees herself as a crusader for restoring the Harkonnen honor. Her methods, however, are far from noble. Early in the series, and as we mentioned a while back, she coldly kills a fellow sister of the Bene Gesserit to secure her own rise to power as Mother Superior. While her motives might seem twisted, her conviction stems from her belief that Abulard was a misunderstood hero and that her house was wronged because of House Atreides. Valia's grudge puts her on a collision course with Kieran Atreides, the Emperor's swordmaster and the only Atreides in the show. Kieran, who seems more interested in wooing Princess Inez Corrino than worrying about ancestral grudges, might not fully grasp the danger Valia poses. Her calculated and vengeful nature suggests this rivalry is far from over. With the Harkonnen Atreides animosity simmering under the surface, Dune Prophecy will explore how old wounds and vendettas shape empires. It's a gripping exploration of how history's ghosts influence the present. Anyway, the aftermath of Battle Corran was nothing but a pre-climactic event. The real conclusion was yet to come. But before we get into that, let's explore what went about in the next 10 millennia as far as the houses Harkonnen and Atreides were concerned. Caladan versus Gedi Prime, a tale of two worlds. So the thing about the Dune universe is that the great houses here rule over entire planets instead of a single country on a planet. There's no US versus China or Russia, it's more like Earth versus Mars, know what I mean? Likewise, Caladan belonged to House Atreides and Gedi Prime was the lair of the Harkonnens. So let's first talk about House Atreides and Caladan to understand why the Harkonnens are kinda correct in hating them. I mean, correct in the sense that if jealousy was a good trait, the Harkonnens were in the right. House Atreides carries a lineage that's rooted in both myth and history. The house traces its roots to Greece on Earth and claims descent from King Agamemnon of Greek mythology. This noble house rose to prominence during the Butlerian Jihad and established itself as one of the most esteemed royal houses in the galaxy. For 20 generations, House Atreides ruled Caladan and maintained a balanced society that thrived under its spiritually fulfilling governance. Unlike the harsh industrial world of Gedi Prime, the Atreides transformed Caladan into a lush paradise. While they championed peace, they were equally skilled in warfare and had huge numbers of expert swordsmasters, war masters, and their own battle language. Now moving on to House Harkonnen, the Harkonnens, once a dominant great house of the Landsraad, was infamous for its brutal and ruthless nature. Its power base lay on the industrialized and bleak planet Gedi Prime, where terror and exploitation ruled. The Harkonnen family name likely originates from Northern Europe on ancient Earth, specifically Finland, with ties to the Finnish word harka, meaning ox. Emerging from obscurity as a minor house, the Harkonnens clawed their way to prominence through shrewd manipulation of markets, notably the whale fur trade. Under leaders like Baron Dmitri Harkonnen and his son Vladimir, they built a legacy of wealth and dominance. The Harkonnen style of governance was a masterclass in fear and treachery. Their soldiers and officials advanced not by merit but through deceit and assassination. The family prioritized production at any cost, ignoring ethical considerations declarations to maintain control and wealth. Their oppressive grip extended to Arrakis, where they ruled as Siradar fiefs in charge of the universe's most valuable resource, the spice melange. By exploiting the Fremen and cutting costs on infrastructure and wages, they amassed immense riches, cementing their power within the Landsraad. Despite their strength, the Harkonnens harbored ambition far beyond spice wealth. Vladimir Harkonnen sought to overthrow the Carino Empire and establish a Harkonnen dynasty. The downfall of Vladimir Harkonnen came at the hands of Paul's sister, Alia, who killed him in 10,193 AG. His nephew, Feyd-Rautha, briefly inherited the title of Baron, only to die in a duel with Paul. With the rise of House Atreides, the remnants of Harkonnen power crumbled. Gedi Prime was transformed under Gurney Halleck's leadership into a greener and more humane world. The Harkonnen legacy as a political force ended, but their bloodline persisted through Bene Gesserit breeding programs. Ironically, the Atreides and Harkonnen lines eventually merged, with Paul Atreides himself carrying Harkonnen heritage as Vladimir's grandson. As we were saying earlier, the Harkonnen Atreides rivalry reached its tipping point as well as its end 10,000 years after the Butlerian Jihad and the Battle of Corran, so let's explore that from the movie's perspective. The Desert War. The Desert War's origins began in secret when Padishah Emperor Elrond Carino IX appointed Pardot Kynes as imperial planetologist on Arrakis in 10,153 AG. This appointment led to a transformation no one could have anticipated. Kynes' opportunity to shape Arrakis came during a routine exploration near the village of Winsack behind the shield wall. In the blistering heat, he stumbled upon 6 armed and shielded Harkonnen bravos intimidating 3 Fremen youths. While such harassment was common, it quickly became clear that the Harkonnens intended to kill the boys. One youth was already injured with a severed artery, while 2 bravos lay dead. Despite their courage, the remaining Fremen were hopelessly outnumbered. Without hesitation, Kynes activated his shield and intervened. He killed 2 bravos silently with his slip tip and dispatched a third with a precise intricer cut. The final Harkonnen was taken down by the remaining Fremen youths as Kynes saved their injured companion. The Fremen were puzzled. Kynes was an imperial servant, yet he had fought alongside them. Grateful yet cautious, the inexperienced youths took Kynes back to their siege, bound by a mortal obligation to him. At Winsack, Kynes began speaking passionately about water, grass, and a vision of Arrakis transformed. He described qanats flowing across the desert and palmaries filled with date palms. His words intrigued the Fremen but also sparked intense debate within the siege. To them, Kynes was a paradox, a water burden who spoke of impossible dreams. Despite his actions against the Harkonnen, he was still part of the Imperium. The Tau of the siege decided to eliminate him. A consecrated knife was given to Uliet, a seasoned Fremen fighter, to carry out the task. Kynes, unaware of the decision, continued his impassioned talk about secret wind traps and the hidden potential of the desert. When Uliet approached to strike, Kynes calmly told him, "Remove yourself," and carried on as if nothing had happened. In an inexplicable act, Uliet turned, walked a few steps, and deliberately fell on his own blade. This gesture was seen as a sign by the Fremen that Kynes was not to be harmed, but rather heeded. Over time, the Fremen embraced Kynes' vision for a greener Arrakis. He returned to his imperial duties, but began subtly redirecting resources to his cause. He brought Fremen into the biological testing station and used stolen tools like cutter rays to dig hidden wind traps in underground basins for water storage. The Fremen hailed him as an Ummah, a prophet, and followed him without hesitation, often at great personal cost. Kynes conducted small-scale experiments and gathered vast amounts of data, all while refining a long-term plan to reshape the planet. Through his research, Kynes discovered sand trout and their crucial role in producing melange. This revelation deepened his understanding of the planet's ecology and the connection between the spice and Shai-Hulud. With his knowledge, Kynes began planting hardy vegetation, starting with poverty grass before expanding to other species. His goal was to gradually turn Arrakis into a more hospitable world. Kynes married into a Fremen siege and raised a son, Liet, teaching him about the principles of ecology and the intricate language of the desert. Liet learned about the balance of Arrakis, the seasons, the climate, and the limits imposed by its harsh environment. When Kynes died in a cave-in at Plaster Basin, Liet, then 19, inherited his father's mission. As both imperial planetologist and a Fremen leader, Liet carried forward Kynes' dream of transforming Arrakis. Guided by his father's vision, he steered the Fremen toward an ultimate goal, one that Pardot Kynes estimated would take 5 centuries to achieve. The Great Spice War and Shaddam's Treacherous Trap. The Great Spice War erupted in 10,175 AG, just a year after Pardot Kynes' death on Arrakis. Padishah Emperor Shaddam Carino IV, spurred by his childhood friend Count Fenring, initiated the war to secure dominance over the spice trade. Project Amal, an ambitious effort to create artificial spice, was nearing completion on Ix. Shaddam's goal was to force the Landsraad Great Houses into accepting Amal as a replacement for melange, the precious precious spice that fueled the Imperium. His plan offered half the captured spice to the Spacing Guild and the rest to CHOAM as incentives for their cooperation. The war unfolded in more brutality, and key locations that could threaten Shaddam's plans were targeted. On Xanovar, the Emperor's forces annihilated House Taligari, and in the chaos, his half-brother Tyros Refa lost his life. Another attack devastated Corona, a Richezian research moon betrayed by the Harkonnens. Bikal descended into civil war under the strain of the Emperor's campaign. Shaddam himself traveled to Arrakis, determined to eliminate the final bearer to Amal dependency by ordering the destruction of all life on the desert planet. This would prove to be his undoing. The Spacing Guild, alarmed by Shaddam's recklessness, withdrew their highliners from the conflict, leaving the Emperor and his forces stranded. The Guild's withdrawal marked a catastrophic failure for Shaddam's campaign, compounded by the fact that Project Amal had not yet produced a viable spice alternative. The Great Spice War ended in disaster for the Imperial House, tarnishing Shaddam's reign and leaving him humiliated. The Landsraad convened a special session to consider censuring the Imperial crown. Shaddam, offering a weak and hypocritical defense of his actions, faced mounting hostility. In an unexpected move, Duke Leto Atreides, a distaff cousin of Shaddam, came to his defense. Leto's eloquence and loyalty captivated the Landsraad as he delivered a stirring speech that shielded House Corrino from further disgrace. As a gesture of fealty, Leto returned the ceremonial blade Shaddam had once given him after his trials by forfeiture, symbolizing his allegiance to the Emperor. Despite Leto's intervention, tensions between Shaddam and House Atreides grew. By 10,190 AG, Shaddam felt increasingly threatened by Leto's growing power. Under the guidance of Thufir Hawat, Gurney Halleck, and Duncan Idaho, Leto had built a formidable army capable of rivaling the Emperor's Sardaukar. Reluctantly, Shaddam conspired with Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, the Atreides' longtime enemies. Together, they devised a trap to dismantle Leto's strength. The Emperor pressured Leto to relinquish control of his homeworld, Caladan, and accept the fiefdom of Arrakis, ostensibly granting House Atreides dominion over the spice mining operations. In reality, the move was a calculated betrayal. When Leto agreed, Shaddam replaced Count Hasimir Fenring, the planet's imperial regent, with Leto. Fenring was reassigned to govern Caladan in a provisional capacity, but he showed little interest in the position, and the people of Caladan in turn cared little for him. As part of the trap, Shaddam planted a spy, Dr. Wellington Yueh, within House Atreides. War of Assassins! The beginning of the near end for House Atreides. The War of Assassins began to take shape shortly after House Atreides arrived on Arrakis in 10,191 AG. Duke Leto Atreides recognized that they had entered a covert conflict with House Harkonnen, though it hadn't yet escalated into open warfare. Amid this tension, Leto earned the trust of the Fremen through his fairness and generosity. His war master, Duncan Idaho, served as an ambassador to the desert people, building strong ties and uncovering their immense potential as allies. Leto soon realized the Fremen were not just survivors, but a formidable force capable of reshaping the balance of power. The Fremen, meanwhile, began to revere Paul Atreides, the Duke's son, as a potential figure of prophecy. Planetologist Pardot Kynes' son, Liet, observed Paul's uncanny ability to adapt to Fremen ways, including fitting a stillsuit correctly on his first attempt. These signs fed the belief among many Fremen that Paul might be the Lisan al-Gaib, the long-awaited savior destined to lead them to paradise. Leto, aware of the gathering storm, decided to take bold action against House Harkonnen. He ordered a raid on Gedi Prime, the Harkonnen homeworld, to destroy the Baron's hidden spice hoards. These stores, intended for illicit resale, were highly illegal under Imperial law. The raid, coordinated by Thufir Hawat, was both daring and effective. It boosted morale among the Atreides troops, who were still adjusting to life on Arrakis after leaving their ancestral home of Caladan. The operation showcased Atreides' military ingenuity and struck a psychological blow to the Harkonnens, who were unable to retaliate openly without incurring the Emperor's wrath. Despite these successes, Leto's foresight could not prevent the devastating attack that followed. In March, after a failed assassination attempt on Paul using a hunter-seeker, Dr. Wellington Yueh betrayed the Atreides by disabling their house shields and drugging Leto, Paul, and Jessica. This treachery paved the way for a combined Harkonnen and Sardaukar assault on Arrakeen, marking the siege that would end the War of Assassins in a decisive Harkonnen victory. The siege of Arrakeen exposed the devastating strength of the Sardaukar and the cunning ruthlessness of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Thufir Hawat, trapped with a small group of Atreides troops, witnessed firsthand the Fremen Fremen's surprising capabilities. In one skirmish, a handful of Fremen warriors defeated a larger Sardaukar force, leaving Hawat stunned. He also saw a lone Fremen pilot use a suicide attack to destroy a troop carrier with 300 Sardaukar soldiers aboard. These events made Hawat realize, too late, that the Fremen could have been a decisive ally. The Atreides forces were ultimately crushed, but key figures like Paul and Jessica managed to escape. The Baron, needing to avoid direct responsibility for their deaths, ordered them sent into the desert, expecting nature to finish them off. However, Yueh, driven by his hatred for the Baron, had secretly ensured their survival. Paul and Jessica overpowered their captors and disappeared into the desert, leaving the Harkonnens to believe that they had perished in a Coriolis storm. The War of Assassins ended with the fall of House Atreides on Arrakis, but it paved the way for a far greater struggle. The surviving remnants, particularly Paul and the Fremen, would rise to challenge the Harkonnens and the Emperor himself in a battle for the soul of the Imperium. Leto's death, the biggest blow to House Atreides. The death of Duke Leto Atreides was a tragic turning point in the struggle for Arrakis. Betrayed by Dr. Wellington Yueh, who sought revenge against Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Leto was handed over to the Baron under the guise of saving his family. Knowing he would not have the chance to kill the Baron himself, Yueh planted a fake tooth in Leto's mouth filled with poison gas. Yueh hoped Leto would bite down on the tooth and poison the Baron when close enough. However, when Leto, paralyzed but conscious, broke the capsule, he mistimed his actions and killed only the Baron's Mentat advisor, Piter de Vries. The Baron survived, and Leto's life ended in vain. Yueh, betrayed by his own bargain, was executed shortly after. Following Leto's death, Paul and Jessica fled into the desert after escaping the siege of Ottakeen. Initially, they regrouped with planetologist Liet Kynes and Atreides swordmaster Duncan Idaho at an abandoned botanical testing station. Their refuge was short-lived when Sardaukar forces attacked. Duncan sacrificed himself to protect Paul and Jessica, who fled deeper into the desert in an ornithopter. They allowed the Harkonnens to believe that they had died in a Coriolis storm, parting ways with Liet Kynes as they ventured further into uncharted sands. Paul Atreides' revenge, the fall of House Harkonnen. The harsh environment and constant exposure to spice heightened Paul's latent abilities. Under the immense pressure of survival, his prescient visions expanded dramatically. He glimpsed futures where the Atreides could be restored, but only if he forged an alliance with the native Fremen and survived the trials ahead. After a perilous desert crossing, Paul and Jessica encountered a group of Fremen led by Stilgar. Initially cautious, the Fremen tested their worth through combat. Paul and Jessica used their Bene Gesserit Prana Bindu training, known as the Weirding Way, to defeat their challengers. Impressed, Stilgar welcomed them into the troop, eager to learn their unique skills. Among the Fremen, Paul met Chani, the daughter of Liet Kynes, whom he had seen in his visions. Their bond began to form almost immediately. During this encounter, Paul disarmed a proud Fremen named Jamis, who felt humiliated and challenged Paul to a duel to the death. Although he was hesitant to kill, Paul ultimately triumphed, cementing his place among the Fremen. By defeating Jamis, Paul inherited his household and began earning respect within the tribe. Stilgar gave Paul the secret name Usul, meaning the strong base of a pillar, while Paul chose the name Muad'Dib as his public identity. The troop returned to their sietch, where they found the Reverend Mother on the verge of death. Seeing Jessica's Bene Gesserit training, the Fremen invited her to become their Sayyidina. Jessica, unaware of the ritual's full implications, accepted to secure her place in the tribe. During the ceremony, she realized too late that the process mirrored the Bene Gesserit transformation of a Reverend Mother, which involved unlocking genetic memories. This posed a grave danger to her unborn daughter, Aaliyah, conceived before Leto's death. Jessica understood that such a process could overwhelm the mind of a fetus, a potentially fatal consequence. Despite the risks, Jessica completed the transformation and gained the trust of the Fremen while setting the stage for unforeseen challenges. Paul, now Muad'Dib, began his journey as a leader among the Fremen, forging a path that would intertwine his destiny with theirs and lay the foundation for a rebellion that would shake the Imperium to its core. By November 10,193 AG, Paul Atreides, now known as Muad'Dib, had become a revered leader among the Fremen. Chani, the daughter of Liet Kynes, became his partner and bore him a son, whom he named Leto. Paul and his mother Jessica trained the Fremen in the Weirding Way, the Bene Gesserit's Prana Bindu combat techniques. Under Paul's leadership, the Feyd-Rautha scored multiple victories against the Harkonnens, solidifying his reputation. To gain full acceptance among the Fremen, Paul rode a sandworm, completing the rite of passage and becoming a full member of the sietch. Shortly after this, a group of smugglers entered the deep desert in search of spice. The Fremen of Sietch Tabor ambushed them, and during the skirmish, Paul recognized one of the smugglers as Gurney Halleck, his former weapons teacher. Overjoyed, Paul called for Gurney to surrender. Gurney, overwhelmed, joined Paul's cause with his men. However, some of these men were Imperial spies who attempted to assassinate Paul. Their plot failed, and the Fedaykin captured them. Paul secretly allowed the spies to escape, ensuring they would report back to the Imperium that he was alive. Next, Paul used his reunion with Gurney to address a leadership dilemma. Fremen tradition dictated that as a Worm Rider, Paul was expected to challenge Stilgar, his closest ally, for control of the siege. Instead, Paul declared himself the Duke of Arrakis, breaking with tradition and forcing Stilgar to accept his rule without bloodshed. This clever move united the siege under his command without losing Stilgar as an ally and friend. Returning to Siege Tabor, Gurney was shocked to find Jessica alive. Believing she had betrayed the Atreides, Gurney nearly killed her before Paul intervened. Paul explained that Dr. Yueh, not Jessica, had betrayed them. Gurney, devastated by his mistake, was forgiven by Jessica, further binding him to the Atreides' cause. Despite growing power among the Fremen, Paul struggled with his incomplete prescience. He could not fully control his visions and felt limited in his abilities. To unlock his potential, he took the dangerous step of consuming spice essence, attempting the male equivalent of the Reverend Mother transformation. No man had ever survived this ritual, and Paul appeared to fail, slipping into a coma. He told no one of his plan, leaving most to believe that he had died. Only his closest followers, including the Fedaykin, believed he was in a religious trance. Jessica, desperate to save him, summoned Chani from the desert. Chani, understanding Paul deeply, realized what he had attempted. Using spice essence converted by Jessica, she brought Paul out of his trance. For Paul, no time had passed, but his mind had expanded. He now fully understood his prescient abilities and declared himself the Kwisatz Haderach, arriving a generation earlier than the Bene Gesserit predicted. He immediately announced that the Emperor was orbiting Arrakis with a massive Sardaukar force ready to attack. Confident in his new power, Paul declared it time to destroy the Harkonnens. The Fremen's relentless attacks on the Harkonnens had nearly stopped spice production entirely. This forced Emperor Shaddam IV to act. He arrived on Arrakis with his Sardaukar and a levied force of noble troops, determined to crush the Fremen and restore the flow of spice. The Emperor, now aware that Muad'Dib was Paul Atreides, sent Sardaukar forces into the desert to gather intelligence. They attacked a siege, killing Paul's son Leto and capturing his sister Alia. Yet, even this devastating assault failed to break the Fremen's spirit. Fremen children, women, and the elderly drove the Sardaukar back, proving their resilience and setting the stage for the final confrontation between Paul and the forces of the Imperium. Now nearing the close of the war, the Battle of Arrakeen in 10,193 AG was the biggest moment in Paul Atreides' rise to power. With the Emperor himself landed on Arrakis, Paul launched a daring final assault. Using Atreides family atomics, he blew a breach in the shield wall that protected Arrakeen, skirting the universal ban on atomics by targeting the wall rather than people. The breach allowed Fremen forces to surge through, riding sandworms and using the cover of a fierce desert storm. The desert shorted out the Sardaukar's defensive shields, leaving them vulnerable. The Fremen launched their attack in waves, led by Gurney Halleck and Korba. Even the elite Sardaukar were overwhelmed by the combined forces of the Fremen and Atreides allies. The Emperor was forced to surrender when Paul threatened to destroy the spice if any noble houses attempted to intervene. Amid the chaos, Alia escaped captivity and killed Baron Harkonnen. Thufir Hawat, upon realizing he had unwittingly served the Baron against Paul, took his own life with a poison needle meant for Paul. In a final act of loyalty, he chose to die rather than harm the son of his beloved Duke Leto. Feyd-Rautha, the Baron's nephew, challenged Paul to single combat under the rites of Canly. Wielding a ceremonial blade given by the Emperor, Feyd employed treachery with poisoned weapons. Despite the odds, Paul triumphed, killing Feyd in a brutal duel. The Emperor's last attempt to eliminate Paul failed when Count Fenring, ordered to assassinate him, refused, recognizing Paul as the Kwisatz Haderach. The battle's outcome reshaped the political and spiritual landscape of the Imperium, cementing Paul's status as Muad'Dib and ruler of Arrakis. Aftermath of the Desert War, the fall of House Corrino, and the first Atreides Emperor. By 10,193 AG, Paul Atreides had enough of imperial games. He overthrew Shaddam IV not by directly seizing the throne, but by leveraging the real power of the Imperium, the Spacing Guild. Paul threatened to destroy the spice, a resource critical for space travel, if they didn't comply with his demands. Knowing Paul was capable of carrying out this threat, the Guild had no choice but to withdraw their support from Shaddam and send his forces home. Stripped of power, the Emperor abdicated in 10,196 and retired to Seleucus Secundus. Paul solidified his position by marrying Shaddam's eldest daughter, Irulan, though their union was purely political. Irulan later chronicled much about Paul's life, though she only knew him through observation and study, not personal connection. With Shaddam deposed, Paul assumed control of the empire, marking the end of House Corrino's reign. Paul's reign began with a Fremen jihad sweeping across the known universe, consolidating his power. He rewarded thwarted his loyal allies, appointing Stilgar as governor of Arrakis and Minister of State. Gurney Halleck was given control of Gedi Prime, the former Harkonnen stronghold, which he briefly renamed Gamu. Despite these gestures, the Fremen Jihad left a trail of bloodshed that cemented Paul's rule but haunted him deeply. Shaddam, meanwhile, refused to accept his fate. He trained Sardaukar forces and worked on a secret Ghola army to reclaim the throne. His youngest daughter, Wencesia, married Dalek Fenring, and their son Farad'n was groomed as the family's hope for restoring Carino power. However, these efforts came to nothing. Shaddam's schemes failed, leaving the Atreides firmly in control of the Empire, while the Carino dynasty faded into irrelevance. Eventually, the rise of Muad'Dib forever changed the political and spiritual landscape of the universe. Bene Gesserit schemes. Did the Sisterhood manipulate both houses? The question of whether the Bene Gesserit manipulated both House Atreides and Harkonnen is pretty complex, to be honest, and it's riddled with several layers. Quite the onion of questions, if you will. While the Sisterhood undeniably had both the motive and means to influence events, their role in the downfall of House Atreides and their relationship with House Harkonnen is entirely plausible, and it seems like something that the Bene Gesserit would do. The Bene Gesserit had their long-term breeding program as a primary focus, aiming to produce the Kwisatz Haderach, a super being capable of accessing all genetic memories. This plan required meticulous control of key bloodlines, including both Atreides and Harkonnen. Jessica, Duke Leto's concubine, was ordered to bear a daughter to further this goal, but defied the Sisterhood by birthing Paul instead. This deviation created something of a wild card in their plans, which led to a Kwisatz Haderach born out of sequence and introduced an unpredictable element to their millennia-old strategy. Despite their disapproval of Jessica's rebellion, the Bene Gesserit did not actively orchestrate the Harkonnen Sardaukar attack that nearly annihilated House Atreides. They were aware of the plot, with Reverend Mother Gaius Mohiam explicitly stating, "For the Father, nothing," which threw light on their lack of concern for Duke Leto's survival. Their focus was on preserving Paul and Jessica, not the political entity of House Atreides itself. Through the Missionaria Protectiva, an ancient program that seeded religious myths among various populations, the Bene Gesserit had unknowingly created a safety net for Paul and Jessica among the Fremen. These legends allowed Jessica and Paul to find refuge and eventually rise to power. However, this was not an active intervention, but rather a fortunate outcome of pre-existing plans. Their influence on House Harkonnen was far less direct. Vladimir Harkonnen harbored an intense hatred for the Bene Gesserit, which stemmed partly from his violent past with Reverend Mother Mohiam, with whom he fathered Jessica. This animosity ensured the Sisterhood had little sway over Gedi Prime. Even as the Harkonnens plotted against House Atreides, the Bene Gesserit were more focused on their own genetic objectives than on the political machinations of either house. So we think it's safe to say that the Bene Gesserit's actions were mostly a calculated detachment from the immediate fates of House Atreides and Harkonnen, but oftentimes, to do nothing is also to do something. I mean, if you see a fire and you do nothing to douse it, you're basically helping the fire grow, and it wouldn't take much time before it burns you as well. So, while the matriarchal order sought to guide and manipulate events to serve their breeding program and didn't have any direct involvement in the catastrophic attack on House Atreides, they did play a part in the downfall of House Atreides. As far as their hand in the destruction of House Harkonnen is concerned, when they planned to make the super baby through Jessica, they knew that it would result in further ostracization and the decline of House Harkonnen. So yeah, they definitely did influence the affairs of both houses, directly as well as indirectly. Though set millennia apart, Dune Prophecy and the main series remain similar in tech, politics, and aesthetics, from spice obsession to fear of AI. Even Emperor Javico Carino serves as a precursor to Shaddam Carino IV. This continuity throws light on the stagnation of the Imperium over 10,000 years. It's an incredible undertaking, and honestly, we'd expect nothing else from the Dune franchise. Unfortunately, that's all we got for you for this video. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, this is Wizard Wheezy signing off for Marvelous Videos. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.